Hey you, the guy with the mop. Come here and show us what you got. Before I break your neck, Ryan Parker's voice rang out across the gym floor. His black belt shined under the bright lights. He smiled meanly. I bet you've never been in a real fight, have you? Mike Davis stopped cleaning and looked up slowly. He was 42 years old and had been working as the janitor at Riverside Martial Arts in Seattle for only 3 weeks. Usually he came after all the classes were done, when the building was quiet and empty. But tonight the advanced class was still going. I don't want to bother you, Mike said quietly. I just want to finish my work so you can keep practicing. Ryan laughed loudly so everyone could hear. Look at him. He's so scared he won't even step on the mat. The students laughed nervously. Some looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. What Ryan didn't know was that the man holding the mop had spent 20 years trying to forget who he really was. 20 years since the day he walked away from fighting after an accident that changed everything. A secret so deep that not even his daughter had ever heard it. Come on, Ryan taunted, walking closer with that same mean smile he used to scare new students. Just a quick demo. I bet you don't even know how to stand properly. Let my students see the difference between a real martial artist and a janitor. Something woke up inside Mike's chest, like a sleeping bear opening its eyes after a long winter. His eyes met Ryan's, and for just a second, something passed between them that made Ryan step back without knowing why. It's just educational, Ryan said, his voice not as confident now. Nothing serious. Just to show the beginners why we respect martial arts. Mike put down the bucket and stood up straight. His movement was smooth and light, too skilled for someone who had never trained. The air in the room changed. Everyone stopped talking. Only the sound of breathing remained. All right then, Mike said, his voice calm as still water. But when we're done, you'll apologize to everyone here for turning a place of learning into a circus. Ryan forced a laugh, but it sounded nervous. Apologize? You'll be the one apologizing when your face hits the floor. Nobody in that room knew that Mike Davis used to be Mike the Ghost Davis, 5-time world mixed martial arts champion. He had walked away at the peak of his career after an accident that took the life of his best friend and training partner. Since that day, he had promised himself he would never fight again. But some promises are meant to be broken when people forget what respect means. As Mike stepped onto the mat, the whole gym went silent and held its breath. Ryan adjusted his black belt dramatically, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Gather around, everyone. Tonight you're going to see why martial arts has ranks. Why some people are teachers and others are, well, janitors. Mike watched quietly as the students formed a circle around the mat. Some looked excited, others looked worried. A girl with brown hair pulled back asked her training partner something, but he just shook his head as if to say, "Don't get involved." Look closely, everyone, Ryan continued, his voice full of contempt. This is the perfect example of why everyone should know their place. A familiar pain rose in Mike's chest, not because of Ryan's words, he had heard worse, but because of the tone, that smug tone, the way people use power to make others feel small. 22 years ago in Las Vegas, he had heard those same kinds of words. The pressure from being mocked had eaten away at him, and just a week later the terrible accident with his friend Danny had taken the life of his closest friend. Teacher Ryan, the brown-haired girl spoke softly. Maybe we should just continue with our regular class. It's getting late. Sarah Chen, Ryan snapped sharply. Are you questioning how I teach? Sit down and watch. You'll learn more in the next 5 minutes than in a month of practice. Mike noticed how Ryan said her full name on purpose, a petty show of authority. He also saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear he had seen in his own reflection 20 years ago when he would wake up from nightmares. That accident still haunted him. A series of punches, too fast, too strong. Danny fell, his head hitting the mat with a dull sound. The investigation called it an accident, but Mike knew the truth. He had lost control. He had let anger fuel his fists, and he lost everything. "Well then, Mr. Janitor," Ryan sneered, "why don't you show my students how to hold a basic defensive position? Or is that too hard for someone whose job is holding a mop?" Laughter spread through the room, but Mike stood still. He closed his eyes, and in a single breath, he was no longer in Seattle. He was back in Las Vegas under the bright lights, surrounded by mocking voices, moments before the tragedy that changed his life forever. "What's wrong? Scared?" Ryan's voice cut through the silence as he began walking in circles around Mike like a hunter. "Or are you just planning to stand there like a statue?" Then he touched Mike, a light push on the shoulder. It looked harmless, but it was full of arrogance from a man who had never learned about consequences. Mike absorbed the push without moving even an inch. His body was rooted deep like a tree, and in that instant Ryan felt like he had just tried to push a wall. The smile on his face disappeared. "Interesting," Mike said softly, almost to himself. "It's been a long time since someone tried to provoke me like that." His voice wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but the whole atmosphere changed, replaced by the terrifying calm of a man who had already walked through life's darkest valleys. Ryan didn't understand. He still thought he was in control. "Did you hear that, guys?" he said, forcing a laugh. "He thinks this is interesting. Why don't we show him the difference between thinking you know something and actually knowing it?" But every insult, every laugh only woke up something deeper inside Mike. The part of him he had buried for 20 years, not rage, not revenge, but a clear memory of who he once was. Sarah froze. She could feel it, the shift in the air. The way the man stood, breathed, and moved all showed control, and a quiet power she had only seen in old videos of true masters. "Last chance," Ryan said, his voice now carrying impatience. "Either you accept this little demo like a man, or I'll call security to throw you out. And guess what? You'll lose your job, too." Mike opened his eyes, his gaze locked onto Ryan's, and in that moment a chill ran down the instructor's spine. "All right," Mike said slowly, his voice low but clear. "When we're done, I want you to tell them why you turned a place of learning into a circus of shame." Ryan forced a shaky laugh. "Explain. You'll be doing the explaining when you're flat on the mat." Nobody in that room knew that for 20 years, Mike hadn't just been running from his past. He had been learning to master his anger, turning it into a weapon of precision and silence. Every insult, every shove only fed the storm waiting to be unleashed. And Ryan Parker was about to be the first, and perhaps the last, to feel its full force. Ryan stood in his fighting stance, clearly pleased with the heavy silence that filled the gym. "May I ask you something?" The gym went dead silent. Ryan turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "Sorry, Sarah, but who's teaching this class? Me or you?" "You are, teacher," she said calmly. "But teaching doesn't include humiliating someone and calling it instruction." Several students exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody had ever spoken to Ryan that way before. "Humiliating?" Ryan scoffed. "This has nothing to do with humiliation. It's about respect and knowing your place." Mike opened his eyes. Something about the way Sarah stood reminded him of his younger sister, Emma. She had the same eyes, the same courage. Emma had died a year ago, hit by a drunk driver. She was only 24. Another loss while he had chosen to hide from the world. Sarah, too, carried her own scars. She had lost her father in a similar accident. The man who taught her that true strength is never used to scare the weak. And today, watching Ryan abuse his authority, she couldn't stay silent. Perhaps, Ryan said, lowering his voice dangerously, if you don't respect my methods, you should find another place better suited to your philosophy. The air grew thick, but Sarah stood firm. My tuition is paid, teacher, and I believe everyone here deserves to learn in a place built on respect, not humiliation. Mike smiled faintly, not in defiance, but with quiet relief. For 20 years, Mike had lived with guilt, 20 years of running, of giving up fame, of abandoning himself. But seeing Sarah stand up for what was right, he remembered who he used to be. Ryan, Mike said, his voice low but steady. The whole room turned toward him. The girl's right, this isn't martial arts. This is you trying to feel important by making others feel small. Ryan's face turned red. He spun around. You dare lecture me about martial arts? You probably don't even know what a real gym is. Mike stepped forward once. His posture shifted, shoulders opened, weight lowered, his stance so balanced that any trained eye could see it immediately. A perfect guard. Actually, Mike said quietly, I know exactly what a real gym is, and I also know that this place stopped being one a long time ago. A shiver ran down Ryan's spine. Something in the man's breathing, in the way he stood, triggered a primal warning to stop. But pride drowned out reason. Enough, Ryan growled, dropping into a fighting stance. Let me show you what respect means. Sarah watched, torn between fear and awe. The way Mike moved, the control in every motion, the rhythm of his breathing. It was all too deliberate, too measured. She realized then, this was no ordinary janitor. Mike closed his eyes and drew a long breath. 22 years of muscle memory flooded back. Every strike, every victory, every lesson carved into his bones. When he opened his eyes again, Ryan Parker was no longer facing a janitor. He was standing before Mike, the Ghost Davis, 5-time world champion. Last chance to apologize, Mike said calmly. To her, to your students, and to yourself. Ryan laughed, but the sound trembled. Apologize? You'll be the one apologizing when you're flat on the floor. He didn't realize Mike had already read him like an open book. The high guard, the tense shoulders, the unsteady back foot. 22 years away from the ring couldn't erase the instincts that once made him a world champion. Sarah noticed several students step back, as if sensing the storm about to break. The air grew heavy, like lightning waiting to strike. Mike stood still, eyes calm, a faint smile on his lips. Not anger, not revenge, but the quiet resolve of a man who had finally found a reason to break his 20-year silence. And as he took his first small step forward, everyone in the room understood. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The Riverside gym fell into suffocating silence, every eye fixed on the two men at the center of the mat. One wearing a black belt, rigid in a practiced stance of confidence. One who had been holding a mop minutes earlier, now standing upright, shoulders relaxed, eyes lit with uncanny calm. Ryan adjusted his black belt slowly, almost like a ritual. He needed this moment, needed that feeling of power. Everyone focus, Ryan declared. What you're about to see isn't just a regular class. This is a lesson about ranks, about why people like us spend years earning this black belt. Mike watched Ryan with eyes that had seen too much. He recognized it immediately. This wasn't true confidence. It was a mask he himself had once worn 20 years ago when he was breaking inside, but had to appear strong outside. Ryan, Mike said softly, not threatening. Are you sure you want to do this? It wasn't a challenge, it was a warning. One last time. But Ryan had gone too far to back down. People were watching. If he stopped now, he'd lose all respect. I don't just want to, Ryan answered, his voice higher than normal. I need to do this so my students understand that respect isn't optional. A few students exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody had seen their teacher like this before, desperate, needing to prove something. Sarah pulled out her phone, not to record, but to take notes. Yet something in the way the janitor stood made her uneasy, as if they were about to witness something far beyond a typical fight. "Do you know," Ryan went on, beginning to circle Mike, "I spent 8 years earning this belt. 8 years of daily training, injuries, losses. And you? How many years have you spent pushing a mop?" Mike didn't answer. He just stood there. But something in his silence made the room feel heavier. Ryan settled into his favorite fighting stance, the one he'd used to scare hundreds of beginners. Feet apart, fists at chest level, weight forward. The classic position of someone used to fighting in controlled environments against predictable opponents. "This stance," Ryan said, trying to sound confident, "has sent plenty of newbies running." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew how hollow they sounded. Because the man facing him wasn't a newbie, and he wasn't afraid. Mike still didn't move. He stood like a statue, neck slightly tilted, gaze steady, neither fearful nor hurried, just watching. And as he watched, Mike saw everything: the high guard exposing Ryan's ribs, the unstable base ruining balance, the tense shoulders showing every move before it began. The weight too far forward, a light pull would topple him, knees not bent enough, no quick movement possible. Fists clenched too tight, wasting energy. 20 years away from fighting. But Mike's eyes still saw everything. "You know what's interesting, Ryan?" Mike finally spoke, as casually as if talking about the weather. "For 20 years I've tried to forget everything. How to move, how to breathe, how to read an opponent. I thought if I forgot, I'd be safer. The people around me would be safer." Ryan frowned, not understanding. "But it turns out," Mike continued, a sad smile touching his lips, "some things can't be forgotten. They live in the muscles, in the bones, in the way your heart beats when danger stands in front of you. And right now, when I look at you, I see it all." "See what?" Ryan asked, his voice unsteady. "I see that you're afraid," Mike replied simply. "Not afraid of me. Afraid you're not enough. Afraid that even with a black belt, you're still the kid who feels he has to prove something." The words cut into Ryan's heart like a knife, because they were true, completely true. Mike could practically feel his opponent's energy falling apart. Sarah watched them both, and she began to see with instincts honed from studying human behavior. Ryan was fighting himself, his father, his past, every voice that said he wasn't enough. And Mike was fighting the ghost of a friend who died 20 years ago. This wasn't a fight between two men. It was a fight between past and present. "Still waiting?" Ryan tried to sneer, bouncing on his toes. "Or are you planning to stand there like a statue?" Mike did the unexpected. He moved quietly. Just a small foot adjustment, a subtle drop of his center, shoulders relaxing into a perfect line. But to anyone who knew how to look, it was an instant and terrifying transformation. From an ordinary man, Mike Davis became Mike the Ghost Davis, 5-time world champion. A few students swallowed hard. Sarah was the first to understand the significance of that shift. A chill ran down her spine. She had watched hundreds of hours of footage of old masters. This wasn't luck. It was skill polished by thousands of hours. "No," she whispered, her hand trembling as she pulled out her phone. "He's not ordinary." The student beside her glanced over. "What did you say?" "Look at his stance," Sarah pointed at Mike, her voice mixing excitement and fear. "Perfect balance, shoulders relaxed but ready, eyes not locked on his opponent. He's reading the entire body. This is a master-level fighter." "No way," the student shook his head. "He's just a janitor." But behind them, another student had already started searching on her phone. There was something about the man's face that looked familiar. "Interesting," Ryan muttered, trying to hide his confusion. For the first time in years, his confidence wavered. Something in the way Mike stood awakened Ryan's deepest survival instinct. Mike took a single step, a small movement, barely a foot forward. Ryan flinched back on instinct. The movement was so unconscious, so automatic, that a few students looked up in surprise. A black belt backing away from a janitor? This wasn't normal. "Is he scared?" one student whispered. The whisper was small, but in the gym's silence, Ryan heard it clearly. Blood rushed to his face. No, he couldn't be seen retreating. He had built this reputation for years. He couldn't let it fall apart because of a janitor. "Problem?" Mike asked gently, and the room fell instantly still. Not loud, not threatening, just the absolute confidence of a man who had stood in the world's biggest arenas and never walked away in fear. Ryan forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "No problem. Just admiring your stance. Did someone teach you that on YouTube?" The line was meant to be mean, but nobody laughed. The tension had thickened to something almost solid. "Actually," Mike said slowly, like a teacher explaining something without anger, "I trained at the National Training Center in Las Vegas. Ever heard of it?" Ryan frowned. The name sounded familiar, like a faded memory from some article he'd read. "Las Vegas?" he asked, confidence draining away. "What kind of weekend class is that?" A few students exchanged looks. They'd heard that name somewhere, too. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. Her hand shook as she typed fast on her phone. "Las Vegas National Gym Martial Arts." The screen lit up. First line: "Las Vegas National Gym, where champions are made." Second line: "Training ground for 15 world champions." Third line: "Home to legends, including—" Her heart stopped. This wasn't a regular gym. This was a place where only the best fighters in the world trained, where a single private hour with a coach could cost thousands of dollars. She looked up, eyes wide with alarm and excitement, and whispered, "Oh my God, he trained there." But it still wasn't enough. She needed to know exactly who this man was. Her fingers flew again. "Mike Davis, Fighter, Las Vegas." The screen exploded with hundreds of results, and there at the very top was a face, younger by 20 years, but unmistakable. The man standing before her, Mike the Ghost Davis, 5-time world mixed martial arts champion. Sarah felt the room tilt. "Ryan," Mike remained calm, his tone unchanged even as he knew the truth was about to come out. "Last chance. Apologize to Sarah for silencing her. Apologize to your students for turning this place into a circus. And most importantly, apologize to yourself for becoming exactly the kind of man martial arts teaches us not to be." The offer of mercy hung in the heavy air. Ryan could choose humility right now. He could admit he'd crossed a line and keep some dignity. But pride, the thing that had fed him through years of feeling small, wouldn't allow it. He attacked. The first punch was technically perfect. A jab, quick and precise, done exactly like in the training manuals. It had worked on almost everyone he'd ever sparred with. Mike Davis wasn't like everyone else. What happened next was so fast and so smooth that half the room couldn't process it. Mike simply wasn't where Ryan's fist was aimed. His body slipped aside like water flowing around stone. No wasted motion, not even a millimeter extra. Head tilting left by just the right amount. Right shoulder rotating to draw a perfect line. Hips moving in an invisible arc. Ryan missed completely, his arm extending into empty space. His punch hit air, and his body fell forward into his own force. "Good effort," Mike said gently, already balanced in a new position. Not far, not too close, exactly the right distance to control. "Clean technique, good speed, but you showed what you were going to do with your right shoulder." It lifts up a little before you throw. Ryan spun around, trying to find him. His heart pounded. How? How could anyone move that fast without making a sound? Beginner's luck, he muttered, more to convince himself than Mike. The second attack came faster, more aggressive. Jab, straight punch, hook. It was Ryan's favorite combination, a sequence he'd practiced thousands of times. And again, Mike wasn't there. This time, Sarah could follow, not because Mike had slowed down, but because she knew where to look. Mike dipped only a few inches, letting the jab skim over his head by less than an inch. The straight punch hunted for its target, but Mike leaned back in an impossible curve, his spine bending like bamboo in wind. And when Ryan swung the hook with everything he had left, Mike stepped back exactly half a step, just enough so the glove passed under his chin by a hair's width. If someone had a slow-motion camera, the gap between Ryan's glove and Mike's jaw would have been no thicker than a sheet of paper. Interesting combo, Mike said, breathing perfectly even, as if he'd been standing still. Works on someone who doesn't move, but after the hook, your entire left side is open. In a real fight, that's when the opponent finishes it. Sweat appeared on Ryan's forehead. His shirt stuck to him despite having thrown only 2 combinations. His breathing grew heavy and uneven. This wasn't normal. He had thrown thousands of punches in his life, in training, in matches, in demos, yet now he couldn't touch a man he'd thought had never fought. "Stop dancing, fight!" Ryan shouted, frustration and panic mixing in his voice. He rushed in even more recklessly. Punches, kicks, elbows, everything he knew. But every strike found nothing but air, and the students began to see. This wasn't luck. This was skill at an entirely different level. Ryan's third attack, a desperate mess of punches, kicks, and sweeps, sliced emptily through space like hitting a ghost. Each strike threw him further off balance. His rhythm collapsed. His breathing broke. Sweat stung his eyes, blurring his vision. Then suddenly Ryan realized something terrifying. Mike was very close. Right in front of him, close enough to see every detail in the man's face. How? Ryan panted, chest heaving. Sweat dripped onto the mat. He had completely lost control of distance, one of the most basic things in fighting. How had Mike gotten so close without him noticing? "Ryan," Mike said gently, his tone as calm as at the start, with no hint of being tired. He stood at arm's length, not threatening, just present. "Do you want to know the difference between learning to fight in a safe gym and learning in professional arenas where a single mistake can end everything?" Ryan couldn't answer. His lungs were burning. His legs trembled. Before he could react, Mike did something that seemed to break the laws of physics. No visible tensing, no turning his hips, no pulling his hand back to build power. No aggression, no anger. Mike simply placed the palm of his right hand on Ryan's chest. A gentle touch, almost tender, as if checking whether the man's heart was beating. And Ryan flew, not pushed, not tripped. He literally flew, as if an invisible wave had thrown him backward. His feet left the floor. His body hung for an impossible instant in midair. Time seemed to slow. Then gravity took over. Ryan sailed back nearly 6 feet, an impossible distance for such a light touch, and landed flat on his back with a thud that made the entire room catch its breath at once. The sound echoed in absolute silence. No laughter, no cheers, no clapping. Only the horrified quiet of people who had just seen something beyond their understanding of martial arts. Students stood slack-jawed, unable to believe what they'd witnessed. One whispered, "What just happened?" Ryan lay still for a few seconds, maybe 3, but it felt like a minute. His eyes locked on the bright lights overhead as he tried to understand what had just happened to his body. No pain. That was the strangest part. He felt only an overwhelming force, as if a tidal wave had knocked him down, as if a strong wind had blown him away. as if every ounce of strength in his body had been neutralized by something he didn't understand. That's impossible, Ryan stammered, voice shaking. He tried to sit up, but his legs were like jelly, not working. Sarah stood stunned, phone trembling in her hand. In 2 years of studying sports, after analyzing hundreds of hours of fight footage and reading dozens of studies, she had never seen, not even on video, such a display of pure controlled power. No violence, no anger, no showing off. Just the perfect application of a technique she'd only ever read about in ancient martial arts books. But this wasn't a myth. It was happening right in front of her. In fact, Mike said evenly, stepping forward and offering Ryan a hand up, a gesture of respect after putting him down. It's quite simple once you understand leverage, precise timing, and how to send energy from the ground through the whole body. Things I learned and practiced over my 22-year professional career. 22 years. Professional. Those words hung in the air. Ryan pushed the hand away, trying to stand on his own. One last attempt to keep some pride, but his legs still shook, his knees still buckled. He had to lean against the wall to steady himself. 22 years professional, Ryan echoed, confused and horrified. In what? Sarah couldn't stay quiet any longer. She stepped forward, phone raised for all to see. Her voice trembled, almost a whisper of respect. Teacher Ryan, you don't understand who he is, do you? Every eye in the room turned to her. Ryan looked over, face still pale. On Sarah's screen, dozens, no, hundreds, of articles, photos, and videos filled the search results. All about one man, Mike, the Ghost Davis. Mike Davis, Sarah read aloud, her voice shaking with both fear and awe. Nicknamed the Ghost. 5-time consecutive world mixed martial arts champion from 2001 to 2005. Considered one of the most technically skilled and hardest-to-hit fighters in history. She paused, swallowing hard. Professional record, 47 fights, 47 wins, 0 losses, 0 draws. Retired unexpectedly at age 29 at the peak of his career. She stopped, her voice catching. After a tragic training accident took the life of Danny Morrison, his sparring partner and closest friend, Davis never stepped into the ring again. The whole room exploded in silence, not with noise, but with shock, with absolute astonishment. Ryan's face went from pale to paper white. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He had just challenged a living legend. He had publicly tried to humiliate a man whose ordinary punch could have sent him to the hospital. Worse, the man hadn't even needed to punch. A single gentle touch had been enough to show Ryan exactly where he stood. Five-time world champion, Ryan stammered like a child discovering something impossible. Undefeated, 47 fights. Mike nodded quietly without pride or boasting. Just a simple fact. I retired at 29, he said, his voice carrying deep sorrow. Since then, I've done any work I could find. Cleaning, maintenance, fixing things, simple jobs, a simple life. No spotlight, no cameras, no need to prove anything to anyone, and most importantly, no ring. Why? A young student asked softly with genuine curiosity. Why give it all up? Mike looked at the young woman, and in his eyes lay a pain 20 years hadn't erased. Because I killed my best friend, he said plainly. Danny Morrison. He was 22. We were training. I lost control and he never woke up. Silence pressed down on the room. After that, Mike continued, I realized strength without control is the most dangerous weapon. And if I couldn't trust myself, it was best not to use it. So I disappeared. For 20 years, I didn't hit anyone, not even in self-defense. He looked at Ryan. Until tonight. The change in Ryan Parker happened before everyone's eyes, painful and undeniable to watch. The arrogant man vanished, the one who always spoke loudly, always needed to prove himself, always leaned on his students to feel important. All of that dissolved. In its place stood someone who had just seen the full scope of his own ignorance, his small, petty arrogance. I didn't know, Ryan whispered, voice breaking. If I'd known who you were, if you'd known, you would have treated me with respect, Mike cut in, still gentle, his words sharp as a blade. That's good. But then the real question is, would you still humiliate another janitor? Another worker without a championship to defend himself? A new student who doesn't dare speak up to you? That question pierced Ryan deeper than any physical blow, because Mike had touched the root of the problem. Not ignorance, not misunderstanding, but arrogance, the belief that one has the right to make others feel small because of status or titles. Ryan sank to his knees in the middle of the mat, unable to stand, not because his body was weak, but because his spirit had collapsed. And in that silence, every student saw something they would never forget, a lesson that true strength doesn't come from defeating an opponent. It comes from knowing when you don't need to fight at all. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady yet respectful. "Teacher Ryan," she said, "for the past 2 years I've trained at this gym out of respect for your experience, but what I saw today isn't teaching. It's bullying disguised as instruction." Whispers spread through the room. A few students nodded. Others looked down, regret on their faces. The truth about Mike, a martial arts legend who had been hidden beneath a janitor's uniform, had completely changed how everyone saw the situation. Ryan drew a deep breath, his voice filled with shame. "Mike, I'm sorry, truly sorry. To you, to Sarah, to everyone here. I have no excuse for what I did." Mike nodded. No judgment, no sarcasm, only the calm of someone who had learned too much from his own mistakes. "Thank you, Ryan," he said softly. "But an apology is only the first step. The question is, what will you do differently from now on?" Ryan looked around the room at faces that once admired him, now looking at him with disappointment mixed with reflection. He swallowed hard. "I'll change," he answered slowly. "It will take time, but I will change." At that moment, Sarah spoke again, her voice ringing clear. "Mr. Davis, have you ever considered teaching again? Because I believe all of us could learn far more from someone who understands that true strength comes with responsibility." Mike smiled, the first smile of the night. Slow, genuine, light, as if releasing something that had been held in his heart for too long. But instead of answering right away, he lowered his voice. "Before we talk about the future," he said, "everyone needs to know why I walked away from everything 20 years ago." Nobody said another word. Everyone sat down, silent. The air in the gym grew heavy, as if they all understood that what they were about to hear would change everything. Mike took a deep breath. His voice slowed, carrying the tone of a man stepping back into memory. "My name is Mike Davis. I was born in a small town called Oak Ridge, Oregon. My father was a farmer, my mother a nurse. We weren't rich, but we had each other." He paused as if seeing again the old fields and his mother smiling at the window. "When I was 15, a coach named Marcus Reed came to town. He saw something in me, a natural instinct, he called it. He trained me for free every day after school. By 18, I was state champion. At 20, I turned professional. At 22, I was world champion." Sarah sat quietly, her hand taking notes, no longer as a student doing research, but as someone hearing a confession. Mike continued, "But there was a problem. Every time I won, people said it was luck, that I didn't deserve it, that I didn't belong in their world. Not because of my race, I'm white, but because I didn't come from a big gym, didn't have connections, didn't have money." His voice deepened. "And bit by bit, those words ate away at me. I began to fight to prove a point, to fight out of anger, not out of love for the art anymore. Ryan listened, his expression growing heavier. He understood pressure, wounded pride, the need for approval. It was his story, too. After I won my 5th belt, Mike continued, I started training with Danny Morrison, my best friend in the world. We were like brothers. His voice trembled slightly. That day was just normal practice, but I came into the gym angry. A reporter had just written that my win was luck, that I'd soon be exposed, and when Danny and I started sparring, I lost control. I hit too hard, too fast, too angry. He closed his eyes and drew a hard breath. One punch. Danny fell. His head hit the mat and he never woke up. The gym sank into absolute silence. A few students bowed their heads, eyes filling with tears. They said it was an accident, but I knew it was my fault. I let anger control me, and my best friend paid the price. 3 days later, I retired. I gave up the belts, the money, everything. I disappeared. I promised myself I would never fight again. Never let my fists hurt anyone else. He gave a faint, sorrowful smile. And I kept that promise for 20 years. I worked as a janitor, doing maintenance, whatever I could find. Simple jobs, a simple life. No spotlight, no cameras, no need to prove anything to anyone, and most importantly, no ring. Not even my daughter knew who her father used to be. Sarah quietly wiped away a tear. The story wasn't only about guilt. It was about trying to make things right, about choosing to live smaller to protect the world from oneself. But today, Mike looked towards Sarah. I saw a young woman stand up for what is right. Protect others. Speak out even when it might cost her. His eyes were warm and bright, like a light switched on after 20 years of darkness. And I realized I was wrong. Strength isn't the problem. The problem is how we use it. Hiding, fearing, avoiding. That doesn't honor Danny. He turned to Ryan. If I teach again, I'll teach this. True strength isn't in making others feel small. It's in helping them stand taller. In knowing when not to strike. Martial arts isn't about controlling your opponent. It's about controlling yourself. Ryan nodded slowly. The room was quiet, except for the long exhale of people who were truly understanding. I get it now, he said softly. And I'm sorry. Not just for today, but for every time I used my position to make someone feel less than they are. Mike set a hand on his shoulder, not to show dominance, but to share the weight. We've all made mistakes, Ryan. The question is whether we learn from them. 3 months later, morning sunlight poured through the windows of Riverside Martial Arts, lighting up a scene very different from the night everything changed. Mike Davis stood before the class, no longer a janitor, but an instructor. There was no colored belt on his uniform, only plain white fabric. "Why don't you wear a belt, teacher?" a young student asked on the first day. "Because a belt is just cloth," Mike replied. "It doesn't make you a better fighter, and it doesn't make you a better person. What makes you better is the person you choose to be every day." From the 8 students of that night, the class had grown to 32. All over Seattle, people were talking about Teacher Mike, the man who had been a legend, lost everything, then found himself again through teaching. But this wasn't an ordinary martial arts class. "Today," Mike said, "we won't start with technique. We're going somewhere." A bus took the entire class to Green Hills Cemetery on the outskirts of town. Mike led them to a simple grave. Danny Morrison, born 1983, died 2005. He lived to fight and fought to live. Mike knelt and laid his hand on the headstone. "This is Danny Morrison," he said softly, "my best friend, and he died because of me." The class stood silent as Mike told the whole story. No shortcuts, no hiding, the pressure, the anger, the punch, the death. "I retired the next day," he concluded. Not because I was afraid to lose, but because I was afraid to win when I couldn't control my strength. You don't learn martial arts to hit people. You learn it to control yourself. At the edge of the group, Lily Davis, Mike's 10-year-old daughter, heard her father's past in full for the first time. Tears fell, but her face shone with pride. Back at the gym, she whispered, "Dad, I'm proud of you." Mike knelt and hugged her. "I'm proud of you too, Lily." Every day that afternoon, Ryan Parker sat in the locker room looking at his new uniform. He was no longer the gym owner. He had sold it to Mike for almost nothing and now worked as an assistant instructor. The decision hadn't been easy. A week after the incident, he lost half his students. The video Sarah recorded spread across the internet, black belt humiliated by Janitor. His reputation in the martial arts community collapsed. Ironically, it was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Over the past 3 months, Ryan had learned more than martial arts. He learned humility, respect, and how to teach without dominating. Most importantly, he understood that value doesn't come from making others smaller, but from helping them grow. "Ryan," Mike knocked on the door. "There's a new student. I think you'll want to meet her." In the lobby stood a 15-year-old girl with her mother. The girl kept her eyes down, shy. "This is Amy," the mother said. "She's being bullied at school. We hope martial arts can help her feel more confident." Ryan saw himself 20 years earlier, awkward, unsure, wanting a place to feel worthy. He knelt to meet her eyes. "Amy," he said gently, "I can't promise that martial arts will make you strong, but I promise it will teach you something more important, that the strength was already inside you." Amy looked up, a spark of hope in her eyes. "Really, really," Ryan smiled. "And I know because someone just taught me that." 3 months after the incident, Mike stood in his office, no longer the janitor's closet it used to be. The walls were covered in photos, not of his victories, but of his students, their progress, their smiles, their stories. Sarah knocked. "Teacher Mike, may I come in?" "Come in, Sarah." She placed her freshly finished paper on the desk. "I wrote about the abuse of power in martial arts. I wanted to thank you." "Thank me." Mike smiled faintly. "I only stood up for myself." Sarah shook her head. "No, you showed us that true strength isn't the ability to hurt others, but the ability to hold back." She paused, then continued, "5 years ago, I lost my father in a car accident, a drunk driver. My dad always taught me strength is for protection, never for harm. That night when I saw you showing control, even though you could have hurt Ryan, I thought of my father, and I knew there are still good people in the world." Mike's eyes glistened. "Your father would be proud of you, Sarah, and so am I. You stood up for what's right, even when it might cost you. That is real courage." That night, Mike sat at the kitchen table with Lily, helping her with homework, a 3-month routine now, father-daughter time every evening. "Dad," Lily looked up from her math, "can I ask you something?" "Sure, sweetheart." "Do you regret it? Giving it up? Being a great fighter, then afterward, just cleaning?" Mike thought, then nodded. "I used to regret it for 20 years. I thought I'd wasted my life, that I should have been somebody important, and instead I was nobody. But now I understand I wasn't nobody. I'm your dad. I'm my students' teacher. I'm a friend to those who need me. And that matters more than any belt." Lily hugged him tight. "To me, you're a champion. The #1 champion." 6 months later, the gym was packed. 50 students of all ages and backgrounds, rich and struggling, confident and shy, strong and fragile. Mike stepped out without a belt, carrying only a heart full of experience. "Today I ask, why do you train?" "To be strong, to defend myself, to win." Mike nodded, then said, "All true, but the truest answer is you train to find out who you really are, Not the strongest or the fastest, but the best version of yourself. The one who controls power, lifts others up, and knows when to strike and when to step away. That's the lesson I learned the hard way. And I hope you learn it without paying the price I did. The class fell quiet, then clapped. Not loudly, but steady and respectful, as if they'd just found something they hadn't known they were looking for. A year later, Mike stood before Danny Morrison's grave. He came every week now, no longer out of shame, but out of gratitude. "Thank you, Danny," he whispered. "You taught me the greatest lesson. Uncontrolled strength is dangerous. Controlled strength is a gift. I'm trying to live in a way that makes you proud, with every student, with Lily, so that the tragedy has meaning." A light breeze moved through the cemetery. Mike smiled and walked back to the car where Lily was waiting. "Did you talk to Uncle Danny, Dad?" "I did, sweetheart." "What did he say?" Mike looked back at the grave, then smiled at his daughter. "He said, 'Keep going. Make it matter.' And that's what I'm going to do." The lesson: when justice doesn't come from a punch, it comes from a lesson. Mike Davis proves that true strength isn't in knocking an opponent down. It's in lifting them up after the fall. Ryan Parker learned the hard way that respect can't be demanded, only earned. Sarah Chen shows that courage isn't the absence of fear, but speaking up while afraid. If this story touched you, remember, you don't need to be a champion to make a difference. You need the courage to stand for what's right, the humility to admit you're wrong, and the kindness to lift others up. That is the kind of strength that changes the world.